Arya stepped into the headquarters of Hawthorne and Beck, just as she had every day for years. The office buzzed with the energy of the morning rush. Executives strode confidently. Employees hurriedly prepared for important meetings. But no one noticed Arya. She moved quietly through the side entrance, pushing her cleaning cart in a steady rhythm. Her dark green uniform became an invisible shield, allowing her to blend into the backdrop of power. With a composed face and unreadable eyes, she was a silent shadow gliding through the brightly lit hallways, present when needed, forgotten just as quickly. Hawthorne and Beck was a corporate giant, a symbol of success and influence in the heart of Dallas, Texas. But behind its gleaming glass walls lay a far colder reality. The company's culture left no room for the weak. Those with the loudest voices and the greatest ambition climbed the ranks, while people like Arya, those who handled the work no one cared to notice, were dismissed, pushed to the margins. She was the one who cleaned their desks, emptied their trash, straightened the piles of papers they left scattered, and, on occasion, received nothing more than a fleeting nod from those who acknowledged her existence. But what they didn't know was that the woman they overlooked every day was far more than just a janitor. She was an observer, attuned to every whispered conversation, every scheme unfolding behind closed conference room doors. And most of all, she held a secret that could shake the entire building to its core. No one at Hawthorne and Beck knew that Arya was more than just a janitor. She wasn't just an anonymous woman who came to clean and left without a word. In reality, she held more power than anyone in that building could possibly imagine. Years ago, her husband, Martin, had been a silent investor in the early days of the company. He had believed in Hawthorne and Beck's potential when it was still a fledgling business, patiently accumulating shares. No one had expected that, when Martin passed away, all those shares would be transferred to Arya, a woman with no business background, no name on the list of major investors, no presence in high-profile meetings. Yet she was the company's largest shareholder. At first, Arya didn't know what to do with this unexpected power. She had never been a leader, never been the kind of person to make bold decisions. But then she realized she had one advantage no one else did: invisibility. Because people overlooked her, she could observe without suspicion, listen without caution. She had seen the shady deals, heard the whispered promises behind closed doors, and watched as decisions affecting hundreds of employees were made solely for the benefit of a select few. Hamas, the CEO of Hawthorne and Beck, was certain he had the company firmly under his control. He ruled with arrogance and fear, believing no one had the power to challenge him. But what he didn't know was that the woman he dismissed every day was the very person who could change everything. And after years of silence, Arya was finally ready to act. Arya had always been patient. She had quietly listened, observed, and pieced together every fragment of how Hawthorne and Beck operated. She knew how decisions were made behind closed doors, where numbers mattered more than people. She had seen loyal employees discarded simply because they no longer aligned with profit-driven strategies. She had overheard the mocking laughter, the dismissive jokes about people like her, those deemed unimportant, those without a voice. But that morning, one conversation changed everything. As she cleaned near the main hallway, she overheard two executives speaking loudly. "The shareholder meeting next week is nothing to worry about," one of them said smugly. "Hamas has absolute support. The board will never go against him." The other laughed, brimming with confidence. "No one has enough power to challenge Hamas. He runs this company like a king." Arya stopped, gripping the handle of her cart tightly. They were wrong. They didn't know that there was someone with enough power to change everything. Someone they had never considered, never even thought about. A surge of anger rose within her, but she held it back. The time had come. She was no longer just an observer. She had gathered enough evidence, crafted a plan, and most importantly, she had the true power to bring Hamas down. They didn't see it coming, but soon they would. Arya knew that to take down Hamas, she couldn't act recklessly. She needed to be meticulous, and the first step was gathering evidence. Over her years at Hawthorne and Beck, she had quietly observed and memorized everything. She knew which meetings happened behind closed doors, which deals were hidden, and which employees had been cast aside simply for speaking out. But she needed more than just memory. She needed proof. Using her position to her advantage, Arya began collecting information systematically. She memorized the schedules of top executives, listened carefully to seemingly harmless conversations that revealed far more than they should, and paid close attention to the documents left unattended, irregular expense reports, printed emails that hadn't yet been destroyed, forgotten spreadsheets containing questionable figures. No one in the company paid attention to a janitor, and that was exactly her advantage. But Arya wasn't doing this alone. She knew she needed allies to make her move. She reached out to a few trusted contacts outside the company, lawyers, financial analysts, and former employees who had been unjustly fired. She shared what she knew and sought their help in making sure the evidence she gathered could hold up legally. Every step was calculated. Arya understood that she had only one chance to bring down Hamas and his accomplices. She couldn't afford to fail, and as the final pieces of her plan fell into place, she knew the moment to act was drawing near. The shareholder meeting was approaching, and Arya knew this was the defining moment. She was no longer an invisible janitor in this building. She was the one holding the future of Hawthorne and Beck in her hands. Every piece of her plan had fallen perfectly into place. The evidence she had gathered wasn't just speculation or baseless accusations, it was undeniable truth. When she walked into the boardroom that morning, no one paid her any attention. The executives were too busy with their usual conversations about profits, confident that Hamas would continue his reign over the company without opposition. No one suspected that the quiet woman who pushed a cleaning cart every day was about to change everything. But today, Arya was silent no longer. She placed a thick folder on the table in front of the shareholders, cutting through the air of corporate authority with a calm but firm voice. "Excuse me, but I have something to say." All eyes turned toward her, surprised, annoyed, even confused. Hamas stared at her, at first with his usual dismissiveness, but as his gaze fell on the folder, emblazoned with the Hawthorne and Beck logo and the bold title Shareholder Report, his smug smile began to fade. Arya met his eyes, her posture straight, her voice unwavering. "I am not just a janitor. I am the largest shareholder of this company, and today I am here to fire you." The room fell into stunned silence, and that was the moment everything began to change. Hamas couldn't believe what he had just heard. The boardroom, once filled with his confidence and arrogance, was now swallowed by dead silence. The executives who had laughed and spoken so smugly now exchanged uneasy glances, struggling to grasp what was unfolding. None of them had ever considered Arya a threat. To them, she was just a janitor, an invisible figure. But now she stood before them as the largest shareholder of Hawthorne and Beck, armed with undeniable evidence of the corruption and unethical practices that had rotted the company from within. Hamas tried to regain control. He let out a laugh, but it lacked the usual confidence. "You're joking, right?" he said, forcing a calm tone. "You really think a janitor can take me down?" Arya didn't blink. "I don't think. I know." She pushed the folder forward, her gaze unwavering. "The board can review it for themselves. Everything is here: the inflated expense reports, the budget cuts that slashed employee wages while padding executive profits, the shady transactions you tried to bury, and I have the authority to call for a vote right now. The executives began flipping through the documents. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to deep concern. Hamas could feel control slipping from his grasp. He glanced around the room, searching for an ally, but none were willing to stand by him now. Then a voice cut through the silence. "I motion for a vote." Everything was collapsing, and Hamas knew this time there was no saving himself. Hamas scanned the boardroom, searching for support, but the silence of the executives spoke volumes. They had once bowed to him out of fear, believing he was untouchable, but now, with Arya's evidence laid bare before them, they saw the truth: he was no longer invincible. One executive cleared his throat and placed the folder back on the table. "I second the motion for a vote," he said, his tone stripped of its former arrogance. Another nodded in agreement, followed by another. Those who had once stood behind Hamas were now turning their backs on him, not out of morality, but because they knew the game had changed. Hamas clenched his fist against the table, his face reddening with rage. "This is absurd," he growled. "You're really going to let a janitor, a nobody, stand here and dictate the future of this company?" Arya remained unfazed. She met his glare with a calm yet piercing gaze. "I was never a nobody. You just never bothered to look." The board began to cast their votes. The result came faster than anyone expected. One executive solemnly announced, "The majority vote has been reached. Hamas, you are officially removed from your position as CEO of Hawthorne and Beck." The air in the room grew heavy. Hamas attempted to protest, but as two security guards stepped forward to escort him out, he knew he had lost. Arya felt no triumph, no satisfaction in his downfall. She hadn't done this for revenge. She had done it for the company, for those who had been dismissed and disregarded, for real change. And now she had the chance to make that change a reality. News of Hamas's removal spread through Hawthorne and Beck like a storm. The hallways, once filled with hushed whispers, were now buzzing with shock, disbelief, and even excited murmurs. No one could believe that the woman they had overlooked for years was, in fact, the one who held the greatest power in the company. Arya stepped out of the boardroom, no longer the silent janitor she had once been. But more importantly, she no longer felt invisible. The employees who had once glanced past her without a second thought, some even treating her as if she didn't exist, now looked at her with respect. No one dared underestimate the woman who had taken down one of the most powerful CEOs in the company, not through force, but through persistence, intelligence, and strategy. But Arya wasn't seeking applause. She hadn't done this for recognition or to prove herself to those who had dismissed her. She had done it for those who had suffered under Hamas's rule, the employees who had been exploited, the loyal workers who had been cast aside simply because they no longer served the company's bottom line. As she passed through the main lobby, a young intern hesitantly approached her. He was the same boy Hamas had humiliated over a spilled coffee. He hesitated for a moment, then softly said, "Thank you." "For everything." Arya paused, studying him for a moment before offering a small, knowing smile. "I didn't change this place alone. We did it together." And she knew this was only the beginning. Arya wasn't surprised by the company's reaction. She knew people would talk, question, and even struggle to believe the truth. Just a day ago, she had been nothing more than an anonymous janitor, someone who merely appeared to clean their desks. But today, she was the woman who had taken down Hamas, the once untouchable CEO no one had ever dared to challenge. The board now looked at her differently. Some executives seemed unsure of how to treat her. Those who had once ignored her in the hallways now nodded with newfound respect. But Arya didn't care about their sudden change in demeanor. She hadn't done this for their recognition. Hamas was gone, but Arya's real work had only just begun. Removing a corrupt CEO was one thing. Changing the culture of an entire company was a far greater challenge. She didn't want Hawthorne and Beck to simply replace one bad leader with another. She wanted to create real, lasting change. And so, on her first day after Hamas's removal, Arya returned to the company, not with a mop, but with a plan. The injustices that had been overlooked would be corrected. The voices that had been silenced would finally be heard. This wasn't just the transformation of one individual, it was the transformation of an entire system. Because true power doesn't come from who sits in the leadership chair, it comes from what they choose to do with it. Arya's story is a testament to the power of patience, observation, and acting at the right moment. In a world where status and reputation often dictate who gets to be heard, she proved that even those deemed invisible can bring about monumental change. She didn't wield power for revenge or dominance, but to right the wrongs and restore fairness for those who had been overlooked. This story reminds us that a person's value isn't determined by their job title or social standing, but by their ability to recognize what is right and the courage to act on it. Hamas believed power was untouchable, but he forgot that arrogance and greed always lead to downfall. A system can only survive when those within it believe in its leadership. Once trust is lost, no one can stand unchallenged. The greatest lesson here is to never underestimate anyone. The people you ignore today might be the ones who change the world tomorrow. Arya didn't just reclaim justice for herself. She did it for everyone who had ever been silenced. Thank you for watching. If you found this video interesting or enjoyable, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel grow and reach more amazing viewers like you. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you never miss out on our future uploads. Your support means the world to us and keeps us motivated to create even better content for you.